Ivy Rodriguez had no idea why she let her friend talk her into this. Standing in the marble lobby of the Riverside Grand Hotel, watching wealthy people in expensive suits and glittering dresses walk past her, she felt completely out of place. Her simple black dress from Target looked painfully ordinary, next to the designer gowns swishing by. She tugged at the hem self-consciously, wishing she'd just stayed home with a good book and her cat. "Come on, it'll be fun," her friend Rachel had promised earlier that week. "Free food, fancy venue, and you never go anywhere. When's the last time you did something exciting?" Ivy had wanted to point out that her idea of exciting was finding a new coffee shop with good Wi-Fi, not rubbing elbows with lawyers and business owners at a charity fundraiser. But Rachel had already bought the tickets, and backing out would have meant leaving her friend to go alone. So here she was, clutching a small purse and trying to look like she belonged. The ballroom doors opened, and the sight inside almost made her turn around and leave. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks. Round tables draped in white linen filled the space, each one decorated with towering centerpieces of roses and orchids. A string quartet played softly in one corner, and waiters in crisp white jackets glided between guests carrying trays of champagne and tiny foods she couldn't even identify. "Isn't this amazing?" Rachel grabbed her arm, eyes sparkling with excitement. Rachel worked as a paralegal at Harrison & Associates, the law firm hosting tonight's event. She'd been talking about it for weeks. The senior partners go all out for their annual charity thing. Last year they raised over $200,000. Ivy just nodded, following Rachel through the crowd. She caught snippets of conversation as they walked: stock portfolios, vacation homes in Aspen, someone's son getting into Harvard. These weren't her people. She worked in medical billing at a small clinic, spent her evenings in her modest apartment, and her biggest recent purchase was a new desk lamp. What was she even doing here? They found their assigned table near the back of the room. Perfect. Ivy could sit quietly, eat whatever food they served, and count down the minutes until she could politely leave. Rachel immediately started chatting with the other people at their table, all colleagues from her firm. Ivy smiled politely when introduced, but didn't try to join the conversation about cases and clients and office politics. Instead, she let her eyes wander around the room. That's when she noticed the piano. It sat in the far corner, partially hidden behind some decorative screens covered in ivy and fairy lights. A gorgeous black grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the chandelier light. Someone had draped the top with an elaborate floral arrangement, like it was just another piece of fancy furniture for display. Something twisted in Ivy's chest. She looked away quickly, focusing on the glass of water a waiter had placed in front of her. "Don't think about it," she told herself. "That part of your life is over." The evening dragged on. There were speeches about the charity they were supporting, something about providing music education to underprivileged kids. Ironic, Ivy thought bitterly. Rich people congratulating themselves for caring about music, while treating that beautiful piano like a decoration. She immediately felt guilty for the thought. At least they were raising money for a good cause. That was more than she was doing. Dinner was served. Some kind of fancy chicken with sauce she didn't recognize. Vegetables arranged artistically on the plate. She picked at it, half listening to Rachel's animated conversation with a junior partner about a recent case. The food was probably delicious, but Ivy barely tasted it. She kept glancing at that piano, memories threatening to surface that she'd worked hard to bury. After dinner, the mood shifted. People stood up, mingling again, moving toward the silent auction table set up along one wall. Ivy watched them examine the items: vacation packages, signed sports memorabilia, jewelry, artwork. Everything cost more than she made in a month. Then she noticed a commotion near the front of the room. A well-dressed woman in a navy blue gown. Ivy recognized her from earlier speeches as Catherine Wellington, one of the senior partners, was talking urgently on her phone. Even from across the room, Ivy could see the woman's face getting red with frustration. "What's going on?" Rachel asked someone passing their table. "The pianist didn't show up," the man said, shaking his head. "Family emergency or something. Mrs. Wellington is freaking out because they're supposed to have background music during the auction." Rachel made a sympathetic noise. "That's too bad. Though honestly, nobody really pays attention to background music anyway." But Mrs. Wellington clearly disagreed. She was now talking to one of the waiters, gesturing emphatically. The poor young man looked terrified, shaking his head apologetically. The string quartet had already packed up and left. There was no backup plan. Ivy felt Rachel stiffen beside her. Oh no. She knew that look. Rachel, don't. My friend took piano lessons, Rachel called out, her voice carrying across the nearby tables. Several heads turned. Mrs. Wellington's sharp gaze landed on their table like a laser beam. Ivy wanted to sink through the floor. Rachel, she hissed. What are you doing? Helping, Rachel whispered back. You played piano, right? You told me that. That was a long time ago. I can't. But Mrs. Wellington was already making her way over, her heels clicking purposefully against the marble floor. She looked down at Ivy with an expression that was somehow both desperate and dismissive at the same time. The look of someone who needed help but didn't expect much from the person offering it. You play piano? Mrs. Wellington's tone suggested she doubted it. It's been years, Ivy stammered. Can you play something simple? We just need background noise. Nothing complicated. Maybe Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or Chopsticks. Just something soft so we don't have dead silence during the auction. It's rather awkward. The woman wasn't really asking. She was telling. And the way she said it, like Ivy was barely capable of plunking out a children's song, made something hot and uncomfortable bloom in Ivy's chest. Around them, people had started to notice the conversation. Ivy felt eyes on her, curious, doubtful, some amused, like watching someone volunteer for something they clearly weren't qualified to do. Her hands started trembling. She pressed them flat against her lap, hidden under the table. Say no, the rational part of her brain screamed. You haven't touched a piano in 8 years. You have no idea if you can even still play. This is a terrible idea. But another part of her, a part she'd tried to silence for so long, was already standing up. Already nodding. Already walking toward that piano in the corner like she was in a dream. Thank you so much, dear, Mrs. Wellington said, already turning away, crisis averted. She didn't even wait for a response. Ivy walked across the ballroom floor. Each step felt heavy, light, terrifying, inevitable. People barely glanced at her as she passed. She was just the background music girl now, the help, someone to fill the silence. She reached the piano and stood there for a moment staring at the keys. They looked the same as they always had. Black and white, silent and waiting. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. Slowly, carefully, she pulled out the bench and sat down. The seat was the right height. Her feet found the pedals automatically, muscle memory from another lifetime. She placed her hands on her lap, trying to stop them from shaking. This was a mistake. She should have said no. She should leave right now. But then her fingers lifted, hovering over the keys like birds about to land. And in that moment, 8 years of silence hung in the balance, ready to shatter. Ivy took a deep breath and let her fingers touch the keys. They felt cool and smooth, exactly as she remembered. For a moment, she just sat there, feeling the familiar texture under her fingertips. 8 years. It had been 8 years since she'd last done this. She pressed down gently on middle C. The note rang out clear and pure in the busy room. Nobody noticed. Of course they didn't. The auction was starting and people were crowding around the tables, examining the items, placing their bids. The murmur of conversation filled the space. She was just background noise, like Mrs. Wellington had said. That should have been a relief. Nobody was watching. Nobody cared. She could play something simple and safe, exactly what they'd asked for, and then go back to her table and disappear into the crowd again. Her right hand found a simple melody. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, just like Mrs. Wellington suggested. The notes came easily, her fingers remembering the pattern even after all this time. She added her left hand, simple chords, nothing fancy. There, background music, pleasant and forgettable. She could do this for 20 minutes, maybe 30, and then it would be over. But something felt wrong. Not with her playing, that was fine. The wrongness was deeper in her chest, spreading through her arms into her fingers. She was lying, hiding, playing it safe when this beautiful instrument was capable of so much more. When she was capable of so much more. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Mija, when you play like you're afraid, the music knows. You have to be brave. Ivy's jaw tightened. She finished the simple melody and paused. Her hands hovered over the keys. This was stupid. She should stick to the plan. But her fingers were already moving to a different position. muscle memory taking over before her brain could stop them. She started with something a little more complex. A classical piece she'd learned in high school, one of the easier Mozart sonatas. Still pretty, still safe, but with a bit more movement, more life. Her fingers moved faster, finding the patterns they'd practiced thousands of times years ago. It felt good. Better than good. It felt like coming home after a long, exhausting trip. A man walking past the piano slowed down slightly. He didn't stop, didn't even look at her, but she noticed the pause. The music had caught his attention just for a second, before he kept moving toward the auction tables. Something sparked inside Ivy. Something that had been dormant for so long she'd almost forgotten it existed. That feeling of connecting with someone through music, even for just a moment. That tiny bit of recognition that what she was creating mattered. Her fingers pressed deeper into the keys. The Mozart piece ended, and instead of stopping or going back to something simpler, she transitioned into a Chopin nocturne. This one was harder, more emotional. The melody sang out above the steady left-hand accompaniment, rising and falling like breath, like heartache, like hope. More people slowed down as they passed. A woman in a red dress actually turned to look, her eyes finding Ivy at the piano. But then someone called her name and she turned away back to the social world of the fundraiser. Ivy's heart was pounding now, but not from nervousness anymore. From excitement, from the pure joy of playing again. How had she stayed away from this for so long? How had she convinced herself she didn't need it? The Chopin ended and her hands kept moving. Beethoven now, one of his famous sonatas. Her fingers flew across the keys, the technical passages coming back to her like magic. She could feel the tension in the piece, the drama, the way Beethoven could take a simple theme and transform it into something powerful and urgent. The conversations near the piano had gotten quieter. She could feel it more than hear it. That subtle shift in the room's energy when something unexpected starts to happen. But she was too far gone now to stop. The music was pouring out of her, 8 years of silence breaking like a dam. Every emotion she'd buried, the grief, the sacrifice, the lost dreams, the what-ifs that haunted her late at night, all of it channeled through her fingers into the keys. She finished the Beethoven and took a breath. Her hands were trembling slightly, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from the sheer thrill of playing again. She should stop now. She'd already played way more than what they'd asked for. But there was one more piece calling to her. One more mountain to climb. Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto No. 2. One of the most beautiful, most technically demanding pieces in classical piano repertoire. She'd performed it exactly once in her life, at her senior recital at Juilliard. It had been the pinnacle of everything she'd worked for, everything she'd sacrificed for. And she'd played it perfectly. Could she still do it? Without the orchestra, just the piano part? Without any warm-up, without having practiced in 8 years? She didn't let herself think about it. Her hands found the opening chords. Deep, resonant, haunting. The famous opening that anyone who loved classical music would recognize instantly. The sound filled the ballroom like a wave. Rich and dark and impossibly beautiful. Her left hand played the rolling chords while her right hand found the melody, soaring above like a bird in flight. Now people were definitely noticing. Conversations stuttered and stopped. Heads turned. Someone near the auction table said, "Wait, what is that?" But Ivy wasn't in the ballroom anymore. She was in the music, lost in the cascading notes, the way the melody built and built, tension mounting with each phrase. Her whole body moved with the piece, swaying, leaning into the dramatic moments, pulling back for the tender ones. The technical passages came, impossibly fast runs up and down the keyboard, her fingers blurring as they flew across the keys. She didn't think about them. Thinking would make her mess up. She just let her hands remember, let the countless hours of practice she'd put in years ago carry her through. The piece built to its first big crescendo. Her hands crashed down on the keys with power she didn't know she still had. The piano sang, loud and proud and absolutely fearless. The sound seemed to shake the crystal chandeliers above. The room had gone completely silent now. Every conversation had stopped. Every person had turned to look at the piano in the corner, at the woman in the simple black dress who was playing like her life depended on it. Mrs. Wellington stood frozen by the auction table, her mouth slightly open, her earlier condescension replaced by pure shock. Rachel had pushed back from their table, standing up to see better, her hands pressed to her mouth. eyes wide with disbelief. The waiters had stopped moving. The bartender had stopped pouring. Even the staff stood still, mesmerized. But Ivy saw none of it. Her eyes were closed now, her fingers moving on pure instinct and memory. The music poured out of her like water from a spring that had been blocked for too long. Unstoppable, necessary, true. The piece moved into its famous lyrical section. The melody so beautiful it made your chest hurt. Ivy's fingers caressed the keys now instead of attacking them, pulling out every ounce of emotion from each note. This was the part that made people cry, the part that made you remember everyone you'd ever loved and lost, the part that made you believe in beauty again even when everything felt hopeless. Someone in the audience actually gasped. Ivy heard it dimly, like sound from another world. She pushed forward into the final section. The most difficult part, the part where most pianists, even professionals, made mistakes. Her hands leaped across the keyboard, covering impossible distances, playing patterns so fast and complex they seemed inhuman. But she'd done this before. Her hands knew the way. The music built and built, climbing higher, getting louder, more urgent, more powerful. She could feel the climax coming, the final triumphant moment where everything came together. Her hands raised high above the keyboard, ready for the final crushing chords. This was it, the moment where she'd prove to everyone, to the world, to herself, that she was still here. Still alive, still capable of creating something extraordinary. She brought her hands down with everything she had. The final chords rang out like thunder, like victory, like a declaration of war against every voice that had ever told her to play small and quiet and safe. The last note hung in the air. Ivy's hand stayed on the keys, shaking. Her chest heaved as she caught her breath. Slowly, carefully, she opened her eyes and saw 300 people staring at her in absolute silence. The silence lasted for what felt like forever. Ivy sat frozen at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could probably hear it. 300 faces stared at her. Some mouths hung open, some eyes were wide with shock. A few people had tears running down their cheeks. Oh God, what had she done? Then someone started clapping. Just one person at first, slow and deliberate. Then another joined in. And another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom erupted into thunderous applause. People weren't just clapping. They were on their feet, giving her a standing ovation. Some were whistling. Some were shouting. The sound crashed over her like a physical force. Ivy's face burned hot. She stood up quickly, nearly knocking over the piano bench, her legs shaky. She didn't know where to look, what to do with her hands. She gave a small, awkward bow, then tried to slip away from the piano, hoping to disappear back into the crowd. But people were already rushing toward her. A sea of expensive suits and glittering jewelry closing in from all directions. She backed up against the piano, trapped. That was incredible. A man in a gray suit grabbed her hand, shaking it enthusiastically. Where did you train? How long have you been playing? A woman in pearls pushed closer, her phone already out and recording. Are you a professional? Do you perform regularly? Another voice from the crowd. Can I get a picture with you? Someone's phone was already up. Camera pointed at her face. Ivy's mind went blank. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. This was too much. Too many people, too many questions, too much attention. She felt like she couldn't breathe. Then Rachel was there, pushing through the crowd, grabbing Ivy's arm. Excuse us, she said firmly, pulling Ivy away from the mob. She guided her toward the back of the room near the doors that led to the hotel lobby. I need some air, Ivy managed to say, her voice coming out strangled and small. Rachel nodded and practically dragged her out of the ballroom. The doors closed behind them, muffling the noise. The quiet of the lobby hit Ivy like a blessing. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. What the hell was that? Rachel demanded, but her voice was excited, not angry. Ivy, you played like a concert pianist. You told me you took some lessons as a kid. I did take lessons as a kid, Ivy said weakly. That was not some lessons as a kid. That was... Rachel stopped, staring at her friend like she was seeing her for the first time. Who are you? Before Ivy could answer, the ballroom doors burst open again. Mrs. Wellington rushed out, her face flushed, her earlier composure completely gone. Behind her came a small crowd of people still trying to get to Ivy, phones out, questions flying. Please, Mrs. Wellington said, and there was something different in her voice now. Respect, maybe, or embarrassment. Please, can we talk? I had no idea. I'm so sorry for what I said earlier. If I'd known what? Ivy said tiredly. She just wanted to go home. An older man in an expensive tuxedo pushed his way to the front. He had silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Young lady, I'm Charles Harrison, senior partner at this firm. That was Rachmaninoff's second, wasn't it? The piano part without the orchestra. That's nearly impossible to perform solo. Where did you study? Ivy looked at all the expectant faces staring at her. There was no escaping this, not now. She took a deep breath. Juilliard, she said quietly. I went to Juilliard. The crowd erupted again. Everyone started talking at once. Juilliard? I knew it. When did you graduate? Why haven't we heard of you? Rachel was staring at her with her mouth open. You went to Juilliard? The Juilliard? And you never told me? I didn't finish, Ivy said, and something in her voice made everyone quiet down. I was in my senior year. I had a full scholarship. I was supposed to graduate, go on tour, start my career, but my mom got sick. She hadn't talked about this in years, hadn't let herself think about it. But now the words were coming out and she couldn't seem to stop them. She had cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave her 2 years, maybe 3 with treatment. There was no one else. My dad left when I was little. No siblings, just me and her. So I came home. The lobby had gone completely silent. Even the people who'd been on their phones had lowered them, listening. I got a job doing medical billing at the clinic where she was getting treatment. It had good insurance and they were flexible with my schedule so I could take her to appointments. I took care of her, cooked her meals, drove her to chemo, held her hair when she got sick, paid the bills that insurance didn't cover. Ivy's voice stayed steady, but her hands were shaking. She lived for 7 years, not 2. 7 good years. We watched movies together, played cards. I'd play piano for her sometimes on the old keyboard in our apartment. Simple songs because that's all I had time to practice. She died 6 months ago. Someone in the crowd sniffled. Ivy saw several women wiping their eyes. I'm sorry, Mrs. Wellington said, and she actually sounded like she meant it. That must have been incredibly difficult. But your talent, you're still so young. You could still have a career. Why are you working in medical billing? Ivy laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Because I haven't played seriously in 8 years. Because the music world moves on fast and nobody wants a pianist who dropped out of school and fell off the map. Because I have rent to pay and student loans to finish and a life that doesn't include performing anymore. Tonight was just, she gestured helplessly. I don't know what tonight was. Tonight was extraordinary, the silver-haired lawyer said firmly. And clearly you haven't lost your gift. If anything, you've gained emotional depth. The way you played that piece, you weren't just technically perfect. You made people feel something. Several people nodded in agreement. Mr. Harrison is right, said a younger woman who'd pushed her way to the front. She held up her phone. I recorded the whole thing and posted it to my Instagram. It's already got 2,000 likes and I only posted it 5 minutes ago. I put it on TikTok, someone else chimed in. It's blowing up. I sent it to my brother, he's a music producer in New York, another person added. Ivy felt dizzy. You all recorded it? Everyone did, Rachel said, scrolling through her own phone. Ivy, you're going viral. Like really viral. Look, she turned her phone around. The screen showed video after video of Ivy playing, posted from different angles by different people. The view counts were climbing in real time, thousands, tens of thousands. The comments were flooding in faster than Ivy could read them. This is insane. Who is she? This made me cry. I would pay so much money to see her in concert. How is she not famous? One video already had over 50,000 views. Another had been shared 300 times. As Ivy watched, frozen in horror and disbelief, the numbers kept climbing. This is not good, she whispered. Are you kidding? Rachel grabbed her shoulders. Ivy, this is amazing. This is your second chance. I don't want a second chance. I can't. Ivy's phone buzzed in her purse. Then buzzed again. And again. She pulled it out with shaking hands. Text messages from old friends she hadn't heard from in years. Notifications from social media accounts she barely used. Someone had tagged her in a video. Then another tag. And another. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. An email notification popped up at the top of her screen. The sender's name made her heart stop. Michael Chen. Oh my God. The woman next to her breathed, reading over her shoulder. Is that the Michael Chen? The conductor? Ivy clicked on the email with numb fingers. It was short and to the point. Miss Rodriguez, I just saw your performance at the Harrison and Associates fundraiser. I'm organizing a concert series called Second Acts, featuring extraordinary musicians who stepped away from their careers for important personal reasons. I'd like you to be one of our featured performers. Carnegie Hall 3 months from now. Please call me. Below was a phone number. Ivy stared at the screen until the words blurred. Carnegie Hall, the dream venue. The place every classical musician wanted to perform. Being offered to her just like that out of nowhere, because she'd broken down and played one piece at a charity event. You have to do it, Rachel said firmly. Ivy, you have to. I can't, Ivy said, but her voice had no strength behind it. I haven't performed in 8 years. I'm not ready. I'm not. You just played one of the hardest pieces in the classical repertoire from memory, without any warm-up, and made 300 people cry, Mrs. Wellington interrupted. If that's not ready, I don't know what is. Ivy looked up at all the faces around her. Strangers mostly, but they were all looking at her with the same expression. Hope, belief, expectation. Her phone buzzed again. Another email. Another message. Another door opening. And for the first time in 8 years, Ivy felt something she'd thought was dead and buried. Possibility. Ivy didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her phone face down on the nightstand because she couldn't handle watching the notifications pile up anymore. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces in that ballroom. Heard the applause, felt her fingers on the piano keys and that email. That impossible email from Michael Chen sat in her inbox like a ticking bomb. When morning light finally crept through her apartment windows, she got up and made coffee with shaking hands. Her cat, Mr. Whiskers, wound around her ankles, meowing for breakfast. At least someone's life was still normal. She fed him, then made the mistake of picking up her phone. The numbers had exploded overnight. The main video of her performance had over 2 million views. 2 million. Her hands felt cold. There were hundreds of comments. Most were supportive, amazed, encouraging. But some made her stomach twist. She's good, but not Carnegie Hall good. Let's see if she can handle the pressure of a real performance. 8 years away from piano? She's going to embarrass herself. Ivy put the phone down before she could read more. They were right, though. What was she thinking? One good performance at a charity event didn't erase 8 years of not practicing seriously. Didn't magically restore the stamina, the mental focus, the sheer physical conditioning it took to perform at that level. She had 3 months. 3 months to get ready for Carnegie Hall if she said yes. 3 months to somehow become the pianist she used to be. Or she could ignore the email. Delete it. Go back to her job at the clinic, her quiet apartment, her safe, predictable life. Nobody could blame her for that. Her phone rang, making her jump. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. Did you call him yet? Rachel demanded the second Ivy answered. It's 7 in the morning. So, this is Carnegie Hall we're talking about. Ivy, you can't just ignore this. I'm not ignoring it. I'm thinking. What's there to think about? This is your dream. It was my dream, Ivy corrected quietly. 8 years ago. I'm different now. Everything's different. Rachel was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Are you scared? Terrified, Ivy admitted. Good, that means it matters. Look, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I've known you for 3 years. And I've never seen you look the way you looked last night when you were playing. You were alive, Ivy, really alive. When's the last time you felt like that? After they hung up, Ivy sat on her couch staring at nothing. Mr. Whiskers jumped up and settled in her lap, purring. She stroked his soft fur, trying to quiet the war happening in her head. Finally, she grabbed her keys and left the apartment. The cemetery was quiet on Sunday mornings. Ivy walked the familiar path to her mother's grave, a simple headstone under an oak tree. She'd been here a dozen times since the funeral, but never quite knew what to say. Today, she sat down on the grass beside the stone, not caring that the morning dew soaked through her jeans. Hi, Mama, she said quietly. I did something last night. Something I haven't done in a really long time. The words came easier than she expected. She told her mother everything. The fundraiser, the piano, the performance, the viral videos, the email from Michael Chen. She talked until her voice got hoarse, until she'd said everything that had been building up inside her. I don't know what to do, she finally admitted. I gave up music for you and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I don't regret that. But now you're gone and I have this chance and I'm so scared. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough anymore? What if everyone realizes I'm just a washed-up almost was who couldn't hack it? The wind rustled through the oak leaves. A bird sang somewhere nearby. You always told me to be brave, Ivy whispered, but I don't know if I have any bravery left. She sat there for a long time, remembering. Her mother at her first recital beaming with pride. Her mother's hands, thin and weak from chemo, squeezing hers before she went on stage at Juilliard. Her mother's voice saying, "The music is part of you, mija. You can't cut it out any more than you can cut out your heart." When Ivy finally stood up to leave, she didn't have answers, but something felt lighter, clearer. She drove to the music store across town, the one place in the city that still sold sheet music and had practice rooms you could rent by the hour. The owner, an elderly man named Mr. Park, recognized her immediately. "The piano girl from the video," he grinned. "My granddaughter sent it to me." Very impressive, Ivy felt her face heat up. "Thanks. Do you have practice rooms available? For you?" "Always." He handed her a key to room 3. "Take your time." The practice room was small and plain with just an upright piano, a bench, and fluorescent lights. Nothing fancy. But when Ivy sat down and lifted the keyboard cover, her heart started racing. She put her hands on the keys and played a scale. Then another. Her fingers felt stiff, clumsy. She tried a simple exercise, one she'd done thousands of times as a student. She messed it up twice before getting it right. Okay, so she was rusty, really rusty. She spent the next hour just doing warm-ups and exercises. Her hands cramped. Her shoulders tensed up. She made mistakes that her 18-year-old self would never have made. It was frustrating and humbling and exhausting, but it also felt right. Like coming home after being lost for a long time. When her hour was up, she didn't want to leave. She paid Mr. Park for another hour. Then another. By the time she finally left the music store, it was late afternoon and her hands ached, but something inside her had shifted. Over the next week, Ivy fell into a new routine. She'd go to work at the clinic during the day, then spend every evening at the practice rooms. She started with 2 hours a night, then 3, then 4. Her body protested, her back hurt, her fingers developed blisters that turned to calluses. Her wrists throbbed, but slowly, gradually she started to improve. The rust began to fall away. Passages that had felt impossible on day 1 became manageable by day 5. Her hands remembered more than she'd given them credit for. Rachel visited one evening, bringing coffee and sitting quietly in the practice room while Ivy worked through a particularly difficult section. "You haven't called him yet, have you?" Rachel said during a break. Ivy shook her head. "Not yet. When are you going to decide?" "I think I already have," Ivy said slowly. The words surprised her, but as soon as she said them, she knew they were true. "I'm just scared to make it official." "What's the worst that could happen?" "I could fail publicly in front of thousands of people, and everyone who's watching those videos and believing in me would see that I'm not special, that I'm just someone who had potential once and threw it away." Rachel set down her coffee and looked at Ivy seriously. "You know what I think? I think you're more scared of succeeding. Because if you succeed, you'll have to admit that you're still that person. The one with the gift, the one who's meant to do more than just get by. And that's terrifying because it means you can't hide anymore." The words hit Ivy like a punch to the chest. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out, because Rachel was right. That night, lying in bed, Ivy pulled up Michael Chen's email again. She must have read it 100 times. Her finger hovered over the reply button. 3 months. Carnegie Hall. A second chance at the dream she'd buried. She thought about her mother. About those 7 years of sacrifice. About the way her mother's eyes had lit up whenever Ivy played, even simple songs on their cheap keyboard. About her mother's last words to her. "Don't let my sickness be the reason you give up on joy." Ivy had thought her mother meant joy in general. Being happy, finding peace. But maybe she'd meant something more specific. Something that Ivy had been too grief-stricken to hear. She sat up in bed, turned on the light and started typing before she could talk herself out of it. "Mr. Chen, thank you for your email and for this incredible opportunity. I would be honored to perform at your second act's concert series. I understand the commitment this requires and I'm ready to put in the work. Please let me know the next steps. Sincerely, Ivy Rodriguez." Her finger shook as she hit send. The email whooshed away into the digital void. For a moment, Ivy just stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Then her phone buzzed. "A reply, already? Miss Rodriguez, I'm delighted. Let's discuss details. Are you available for a call tomorrow at 10 a.m.? We have much to prepare. Ivy typed back. Yes. She set the phone down and lay back on her pillow. Mr. Whiskers jumped up beside her, settling against her side with a contented purr. She'd done it. She'd said yes. The terror was still there, huge and overwhelming. But underneath it, growing stronger by the moment, was something else. Excitement. Hope. And that dangerous, beautiful feeling she'd thought was gone forever. Possibility wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a deadline. It was real. It was happening. And there was no turning back. The 3 months passed in a blur of exhaustion and music. Ivy quit her job at the clinic, something she never thought she'd have the courage to do, and devoted every waking hour to the piano. Michael Chen connected her with a performance coach, a stern woman named Ms. Kim who didn't care about viral videos or second chances. She only cared about perfection. "You're playing like someone who's afraid," Ms. Kim said during their first session, echoing the words Ivy's mother had once spoken. "Stop being afraid. The piano is not your enemy." But some days it felt like it was. Ivy practiced until her fingers bled, until her back seized up and she couldn't straighten without pain, until she dreamed in musical notes and woke up with melodies running through her head. The piece she was performing, the same Rachmaninoff that had started everything, had to be absolutely flawless. No room for mistakes, no second takes. Rachel brought her food when she forgot to eat. Mr. Park at the music store stopped charging her for practice room time. Strangers on the internet continued to follow her journey, posting encouraging comments and countdown posts. 2 months until Carnegie Hall. 1 month left. 3 weeks. The pressure built like a weight on Ivy's chest. 2 weeks before the performance, she had a complete breakdown in the practice room. She was working through a difficult passage, one she'd played perfectly hundreds of times before, and her fingers just wouldn't cooperate. She messed it up once, twice, 5 times. 10 times. "I can't do this," she said out loud to the empty room. I was stupid to think I could. She put her head down on the piano keys, creating a discordant crash of notes. Tears ran down her face, dripping onto the ivory. She'd given up everything for this, her stable job, her savings, her peace of mind. And what if she got up on that stage and froze? What if her hands didn't work? What if she let everyone down? Her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but then saw it was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" Her voice came out rough, thick with tears. "Miss Rodriguez, this is Michael Chen. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." Ivy sat up straight, wiping her eyes quickly even though he couldn't see her. "No, not at all. I'm just practicing." "Good, I wanted to check in, see how you're feeling about everything. We're 2 weeks out now." "I'm fine," Ivy lied. "Everything's going well." There was a pause on the other end. "You know, I can hear it in your voice when someone's struggling. I've worked with hundreds of musicians over the years. The doubt is normal. The fear is normal. But let me tell you something." Ivy waited, holding her breath. "I wouldn't have invited you to perform if I didn't believe in you, absolutely. I've seen the videos. I've heard you play. You have something special, not just technical skill, but heart, soul. The kind of thing you can't teach. Don't lose that by overthinking. Trust yourself." After they hung up, Ivy sat in silence for a long time. Then she took a deep breath, put her hands back on the keys, and started the passage again. This time she didn't think. She just played. Her fingers found the notes. The day of the performance arrived cold and clear. Ivy stood outside Carnegie Hall, staring up at the iconic building she'd dreamed about since childhood. The marquee displayed the concert information, and there, among the other names, was hers, Ivy Rodriguez. Her legs felt like water. Rachel squeezed her hand. "You've got this. What if I don't?" "Then you don't, but at least you tried. At least you're here. That's already more than most people ever do." Inside, the backstage area buzzed with activity. Other performers warmed up. Stagehands rushed around with equipment. Someone barked directions into a headset. Ivy found her dressing room, a small space with a mirror, a couch, and a piano. Her hands shook as she sat down at the instrument. She played through some warm-up exercises, but her mind kept wandering. In a few hours, she'd walk out onto that stage in front of thousands of people. The concert was sold out. The media would be there. Everyone who'd watched those viral videos would be watching to see if she was real or just a one-time fluke. A knock at the door. Michael Chen poked his head in. "How are we doing?" Terrified, Ivy admitted he smiled. Also normal. Can I tell you something? The audience isn't hoping you'll fail. They're hoping you'll be amazing. They're on your side. They want to witness something beautiful, so give it to them. When he left, Ivy sat in front of the mirror and looked at herself. Really looked. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Someone who'd taken a leap of faith, who'd risked everything on a dream she thought was dead. Someone brave. Okay, Mama, she whispered. This is for you. The stage manager came to get her at 8 o'clock. Ivy followed him through the maze of backstage corridors, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She could hear the murmur of the audience beyond the curtains. Thousands of voices. Thousands of people. She waited in the wings while Michael Chen walked out to introduce her. The applause was polite, expectant. Then she heard her name and suddenly her feet were moving, carrying her onto the stage. The lights were blindingly bright. She couldn't see the audience, just a sea of darkness beyond the stage. The piano sat in the center, illuminated by a spotlight waiting for her. Ivy walked to it on legs that somehow still worked. She sat down on the bench, adjusting it slightly, took a breath, placed her hands on the keys. The audience fell completely silent. For one terrible moment, Ivy's mind went blank. She couldn't remember how the piece started. Couldn't remember anything. Panic flared hot and bright in her chest. Then from somewhere deep inside, she heard her mother's voice. The music is part of you, Mija. And just like that, her hands knew what to do. She played the first notes. Deep, resonant chords that filled the hall. The opening of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The same piece she'd played at that fundraiser 3 months ago. The same piece that had changed everything, but this time was different. This time she wasn't playing scared or surprised or lost in the moment. This time she was playing with intention, with purpose, with everything she had. The notes poured out of her, telling a story of loss and grief, of sacrifice and love, of giving up everything for something more important and then finding your way back, of second chances and new beginnings. Her fingers flew across the keys, navigating the impossible passages that had taken her weeks to relearn. The muscle memory was there, stronger than ever, but it was more than that now. She'd lived more, suffered more, understood more, and all of it flowed through her hands into the music. The piece built to its soaring, heart-wrenching middle section. Ivy felt tears on her cheeks but didn't stop playing. This was the part her mother had loved most. She played it for her, every note a prayer, a thank you, a goodbye. The audience had disappeared. The stage had disappeared. There was only the music and the memories and the absolute certainty that this, right here, right now, was exactly where she was supposed to be. The final section approached. The triumphant conclusion with its thundering chords and lightning-fast runs. Ivy's hands were on fire, but she didn't slow down. She pushed forward, pouring everything she had into these last crucial measures. The final chord came. She brought her hands down with all her strength, and the sound exploded through Carnegie Hall like a declaration. Like a victory cry. Like someone announcing to the world, I'm still here. I'm still alive, and I'm not hiding anymore. The last note faded into silence. Ivy lifted her hands from the keys, breathing hard. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the audience erupted. Not just applause, they were on their feet, screaming, crying, cheering. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, beautiful. Ivy stood and bowed, tears streaming down her face. The applause kept going. She bowed again, and again. The audience wouldn't stop. She looked up into the lights, imagining her mother somewhere beyond them, smiling. 3 months ago, she'd been hiding, playing it safe, convinced her dreams were dead and buried. But dreams don't die that easily. Sometimes they just wait for the right moment, the right push, the right reason to come back to life. As Ivy walked off stage to deafening applause, Rachel waiting in the wings with tears on her face, she finally understood what her mother had meant. Sacrifice isn't giving up everything forever. It's choosing what matters most in the moment and trusting that when the time is right, you'll find your way back to yourself. And Ivy had found her way back. Not to who she was before, but to who she was always meant to become. Someone stronger, someone braver, someone who'd learned that the music wasn't just in her fingers or her training or her talent. It was in her heart, and it always had been. The standing ovation continued behind her, but Ivy wasn't thinking about the applause anymore. She was already thinking about tomorrow, about the next performance, about all the possibilities that stretched out before her like an open road. She'd been given a second chance, and this time, she wasn't going to waste it. This time, she was going to live.